The Man Who Laughs is most commonly known as being the film which inspired the character of the Joker. Yes, the man who we all know and some of us love is going to be hitting our cinema screens very soon, if not already, depending on when it comes out in your country. And yes, we are going to be talking about the film that kind of started it all. The 1928 silent film starring the incredible Conrad Veidt, The Man Who Laughs. All on this and more on the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Hello everybody, and yes, welcome back to the Golden Hour Film Podcast. I am Harry Bailey, and we this week are talking about another German silent film. I've done it again, lads. I've got another one on the podcast. And this week, of course, I am joined by my co-host, not guest host, Shay Mulvaney.
How are you doing, everyone? How are you doing, Harry?
Yeah, great, thanks. We're talking about The Man Who Laughs, a film which I have never seen prior to the filming of this. It's my first time having seen it. It's been on the bucket list for ages, and yeah, I'm excited to talk about it because there's certainly a lot to unpack. It's not necessarily my favorite silent film or my favorite German film, but I just find it fascinating. How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good, pretty tired, but that's just part for the course. So kind of having a lot of free time lately to kind of watch different things, but I did manage to obviously get this in, and probably a little bit mixed on, I'd say, but there's some positives in there as well, so we'll talk about those, I'm sure.
Yeah, so it stars Conrad Veidt, who we've covered once before on the podcast in The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. He played Cesare, not Caesar, as we said. Sorry, I guess. Yes, Conrad Veidt, he's a bit of a legend. He's in Casablanca as well. He's in a load of things. And yeah, this film has a huge reputation. It kind of gets grouped in with two other films, those being The Hunchback of Notre Dame and The Phantom of the Opera, as sort of being the three seminal universal silent films of the 20s. They're not quite universal monster movies. They're not quite Frankenstein or Dracula or anything like that. They're the era just before. And it's worth saying that, this film probably wouldn't have been made if it wasn't for the success of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which features a lot of the same cast as this film. That was a huge success. And then, of course, Lon Chaney, the legendary horror actor who at the time it was kind of seen was like the only guy who could pull off these roles, then was signed on to make this film. He was still with Universal. And yeah, reports kind of conflict, but some say that it took too long for them to get the rights to make this film from the French studio who owned it. And Lon Chaney just got fed up and was like, fuck this. And he did Phantom of the Opera instead, which was still a huge success for his career, I may add. Other reports say that he was gone before. Anyway, it's not Lon Chaney. We're not covering Lon Chaney. It's Conrad Veidt in the lead role as The Man Who Laughs. And yeah, it's directed by a man called Paul Lenny. The two of them, Lenny and Veidt, had collaborated before on a film called Waxworks, which I haven't seen yet, but I'd love to see. It looks really cool. It was kind of the big breakout role for both Veidt and Lenny when it came to the American audiences. Obviously, they had successes before, and Lenny also had a film called The Cat and the Canary, which is meant to be a very good film. I haven't seen it. And yeah, the director of this film, Paul Lenny, died the following year from a toothache. You don't hear that happening anymore. What do you know about The Man Who Laughs? What did you know about The Man Who Laughs prior to the film?
Well, basically that was kind of the main inspiration for certainly the look of the Joker. So obviously you look at these kind of the upturned kind of grins that were obviously forcibly put there. The other thing I knew as well is that basically you just talked there about obviously Paul Lenny dying. Basically, Gwynplaine, who is The Man Who Laughs, Gwynplaine's grotesque grin was achieved with prosthetics. So basically they put in a set of dentures that had metal hooks in the corner of Conrad Veidt's mouth, and they basically pulled his mouth back, and that's how they achieved that kind of kind of demented look. But yeah, that's pretty much the only thing I knew. So yeah, it was interesting, kind of learning some more about the film.
Yeah, it was Jack Pierce who did the makeup for this. Somewhat accomplished makeup artist, Jack Pierce. He also did the makeup for Frankenstein, and Dracula, and Bride of Frankenstein, and The Invisible Man, and The Mummy. Yeah, he's a pretty accomplished makeup artist, is Jack Pierce. He had a few hits, and yeah, as well, part of the advertising for this was that they actually said that there was no makeup, and that Conrad Veidt just pulled that face the whole time.
No.
I just thought that was a funny little lie that they did. That was very Hitchcock of them, I feel. It's also worth noting that Mary Philbin, who plays Dia, who is the love interest of this film, was actually like the top billed cast member even before Veidt, because she was in The Phantom of the Opera, which came out just before this, and it was a huge success. So yeah, they thought that would maybe get some more eyes on the film. It is an interesting film. Shane, will you give us a spoiler-free review of it?
So there are moments of it that I like. Actually, really like the last kind of 10 or 15 minutes. There are some good moments sprinkled throughout. I do like the romance between Gwynplaine and Dia. It does do a good job of kind of letting the viewer know that these two do really care about each other, and it does have some good social commentary as well when it comes to, like, because Gwynplaine is, I hate to use this word, but people viewed him as having a deformity, which again I don't like the word, but because people viewed him as having this kind of disfigurement, shall we say, people would laugh at him, and it is kind of interesting in how it shows that. So pretty much Gwynplaine, everyone looks at Gwynplaine as kind of a joke, kind of there for their own amusement, and even like people who are supposed to care about him, like Dia's father, even he does to an extent. He basically uses Gwynplaine.
Yeah.
But the central romance is the thing that kind of keeps him going. So I did like that, but then I'm not a big fan. I think I said it before on this podcast, maybe the Under Capricorn episode. I'm not a big fan of period pieces in general. And obviously this is set in kind of the late 17th century, early 18th century. And the whole kind of aristocratic kind of elements of it, where you have the king and then you have the queen who succeeded him, and you have all these different elements going on. That didn't really do much for me, I have to say, and that is a big part of the film. So from that point of view, it's not really for me. Like, that's not the kind of thing that would be something that I would usually go for. So I did have a bit of a mixed bag in my opinion, but the stuff that is good are pretty good. Conrad Veidt crushes it in the lead role. Some of his kind of facial expressions, and some of his, like, he's doing a lot of work with just his eyes and his body language, and he gets through a hell of a lot of work in this film. So yeah, he crushes the film. So a great Conrad Veidt performance, and an otherwise okay film that I probably won't revisit, if I'm honest. What about you?
Yeah, I kind of second most of the things that you're saying. I do think that Conrad Veidt's performance is like comfortably the best part of the film. He is fantastic in the role, and as you said, what he has to do with basically just his eyes and his body language to give that performance still is fantastic. And yeah, I just thought it was a very slow film to get through. It wasn't paced particularly amazingly, if I'm honest, except for the ending, which is very fast paced. And I think there's like an 80 to 90 minute version of this film, if you chop out a lot of the fat, that is a really, really, really great film. But yeah, there's a lot of elements of this film that kind of feel like you're just kind of sitting through it to get to the better parts. That being said, Conrad Veidt is fantastic in this film. He's absolutely amazing as the titular man who laughs. And I reckon we'll get into the film straight away, and we might at the end talk about what we've watched recently. If you follow us on Letterboxd, it's probably out of date because we're recording this one in advance. But yeah, we'll talk about some other films at the end of this episode, I reckon, and what we're doing post-film club.
Yeah. So the film starts off with King James II, who's in bed with a lot of like statues and sculptures around him. So clearly he's a man of means. If he's obviously the king, so that's pretty obvious.
Straight away, those statues and sculptures are actually a repurposed set from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the
Nice.
famous scene where he's hanging on from the golem for dear life. They are the golems from the Hunchback of Notre Dame film. They just repurposed the set.
Nice. So basically, then one of the statues move, and a guy called Barkilphedro, interesting name, a guy called Barkilphedro, who's basically like a hand of the king, if you want to use Game of Thrones parlance, even though that wasn't a thing, that's not actually ever a thing. Kind of like one of his kind of advisors, if you want to call him that. He came in and it's like he sneaks into his chambers, so it's almost like he's up to no good, but he wakes the king up and he tells him Lord Clancharlie has been captured. And then the king rushes out and he puts on this big, like, goofy grin, this kind of evil, sadistic grin, when he sees a prisoner with a hood over his head. And then Lord Clancharlie tells the king, I came to find my son. So then the king says, look, your son's alive and well. Clancharlie drops to his knees, and then Barkilphedro makes a gesture about the boy's mouth. The king notices this and he says, the boy's after being disfigured by his surgeon. Quote, so he might laugh forever at his fool of a father. So clearly Lord Clancharlie has kind of found himself on the wrong side of King James II, and he's about to pay the price for it because he is executed. The king cuts his head off.
No, he puts him in an Iron Lady.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, he puts him inside the Iron Lady.
I use my imagination. Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he did put him inside the Iron Lady. Yeah. I use my imagination because it's been a few days since I've seen it. Yeah, you're right. Either way, he dies.
Yeah. Yeah, so he says that they sent the son and they sold him to these guys called comprachicos. It's a word that the author of the book, Victor Hugo, he just made it up.
Comprachios.
It's not a thing.
Comprachios, I think.
Yeah, the author of the book, Victor Hugo, just made up the term. It's not a real thing. Basically, they're like a band of gypsy surgeons who take children and disfigure them. Not a great hobby, guys. Maybe change your hobbies. Maybe just, I don't know, take up knitting or something instead. And they said that they got a fair price for the kid as well, which is just awful from your king. And yeah, they put the Lord in the Iron Lady, which, if you don't know, is basically like a big coffin shaped like a woman, and there's two doors and they're covered in spikes, and they'll just put you inside and they close it over, and you die inside it.
That's actually,
they leave you in there till you bleed out.
A cooler death than being beheaded, I'll say that. So
Yeah.
Fair play to the film. And also it does say as well that Comprachios have been banned from England under pain of death by order of the king. So clearly they're up to no good and they're pretending that they're against these Comprachios, but secretly they're kind of in business with them to some extent.
Yeah. And then we see a lot of them boarding a ship. They're all being pretty much kicked out of England. And they decide they're going to leave one boy behind. I think he falls over and they're like, he's not even worth it. He's not even one of them. He's one of the victims. He has his face covered, so we can't really see anything. And there's a doctor on board. He's like, no, we have to let this lad on board, lads. And they're like, no, we're going off. And they leave him behind. And this boy then travels for a while, and we get a really eerie shot where he kind of walks over to this kind of frozen almost wasteland, and we just see in the background there's like 3 or 4 people just hanging, like they've been hung from lampposts. And we also find a woman dead in the streets who's holding her baby. She's basically been frozen to death, and the child comes over to check on her, and he actually spots that the baby is still alive. So he picks up the baby and he keeps the baby inside of his clothes to keep it warm, and he keeps traveling until he gets to the house of a man called Ursus, the philosopher, and his dog Homo. And Ursus basically, he takes him in, and then he realizes that there's 2 of them, that there's a baby. And Ursus initially kind of seems like a chill guy. He's taking these people in, he's feeding them. We see that Gwynplaine's kind of now somewhat more comfortable, because whenever he's uncomfortable or nervous, he covers his face. That's just his calling card pretty much. And he's now more comfortable, so he removes his face covering, and we see that this child basically has a forced smile. And Ursus can't believe it. He's like, oh my god, how are you laughing at a time like this? And he's like, I can't help it. That interaction happens all the time throughout this film. And yeah, we fast forward a few years. Ursus has raised these 2. He also told us that the baby is blind. I wonder where that's going. And yeah, so we've now traveled further in time, and Ursus is using his sort of surrogate son, uh, fucking Gwynplaine. I keep forgetting. I just keep thinking of Gerwyn Price. You know, the darts player. I don't know why. I
Yeah,
keep thinking of Gerwyn Price.
Jesse Price.
So we travel forward a few years, and Ursus is using Gwynplaine as the man who laughs. He's a sideshow attraction. To put it in that day's terms, he's a freak show basically, and Ursus is milking him for that money. Also, Dia, who is the baby, has now grown up to be a young lady now, still blind, and she's in a cart whilst they're making Gwynplaine walk alongside the cart, probably just as a form of advertising. I think just so people can see him out in public, because he is a player. We find out there's basically a whole show written about him, called The Man Who Laughs, or The Laughing Man. It's called The
The
Laughing Man.
Laughing Man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we see a man with an eye patch starts to smirk when he notices Gwynplaine, and it turns out it's the same guy as before who basically didn't want anything to do with this young kid called Harkonnen. So he's the one who let Gwynplaine kind of slip through his fingers years earlier when he was a Compagio. And yeah, so that's a little bit of a no. So that's Outwork Fair, which is a popular attraction for the masses. You get like elephants, circuses, etc. Gwynplaine talks to Dia before the show, and then Ursus says, "Look, I'm going to marry you before we leave the fair." And then Gwynplaine gets really nervous, and Dia wonders, why do you keep pulling away when Ursus brings up marriage? And he doesn't really answer, but then he starts then to look relieved when Dia's like, look, I love you. So I think the romance part is handled pretty well, I'd say. But then when people spot him, he starts to kind of go back into his shell, and he starts to feel more self-conscious and covering up his face then, because obviously people are kind of just laughing at the fact that he has this facial disfigurement, and yeah, they're pretty mean about it. And then Harkonnen then delivers a message for the Duchess Josiana. So they come to this like big manor that Lord Clancharlie used to preside over. So that used to be his kind of his castle, or his manor. And Barkilphedro from earlier, he has prospered even since James II's death, so obviously he's still doing pretty well for himself. And he managed to steal a letter from the delivery person, and he reads it, where basically he finds out that Gwynplaine is still alive, and he's the true heir to the estate, to the Clancharlie estate. So then, in the contents of the letter, then Harkonnen is basically trying to bribe Josiana to meet him in secret, or else he's going to spill the beans. So obviously this presents a bit of a challenge for Barkilphedro to kind of overcome, because he doesn't want kind of the Duchess's authority being questioned. He doesn't want kind of the whole thing coming back open. So then as Josiana gets out of the bath, Barkilphedro gives it a letter, and it's a bit of a weird scene in that, yeah, it doesn't really seem to achieve much. She's already gotten the information, but yeah, it goes on a bit too long.
Yeah.
A bit like a few scenes in the film where it just goes on a bit too long, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, no, the pacing of this is often just slows right down.
Like we learn that Josiana learns about obviously the true heir, and Barkilphedro then is clearly in league with her. They're clearly in cahoots, but then we get another 2 or 3 minutes of them interacting about really nothing.
Yeah, just about nothing. About gossip that like has nothing to do with the film, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to basically show that they like to stir the pot, I guess. But like, yeah, you could have achieved that in far less than 3 minutes. And yeah, again, this gossip kind of spreads throughout the manor, and they spot that Josiana's chair, there's a concert going on, and the only royal not in attendance is Josiana, and they're kind of like, oh well, like where is she? She should be like doing her duties to be at this concert. And it turns out, yeah, she's gone with Barkilphedro to this fair that basically the rest of the characters are all at. And yeah, it's heavily advertised that the Laughing Man is going to be a big show at this fair. You can also tell that Harkonnen is like just jealous at the crowds that he's drawing versus himself and his 5-legged cow. And yeah, he interacts with some of Barkilphedro's men, and then they just tackle him to the ground and rush him, and we never see him again, and we find out later that he died.
Yeah, clearly he's been shaved in the joint.
Pretty quick ending
Yeah.
for him.
Harkonnen is obviously a victim of his own kind of hubris, where he tried to one up the Barkilphedro and Duchess Josiana, but didn't realize what he was getting himself in for.
Yeah, so she basically just attends the fair, and she just does some of the rides. She clearly wants to go to this Laughing Man show, but then she gets given out to for not being at the concert. So she goes to the concert, and then she gets to the concert, and she says, actually, I want to go back to the fair. So then she goes back to the fair. Like, what does any of that achieve?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's it's slow and unnecessary, some of these scenes. But that's what I'm saying. Like, there is definitely... This film's nearly 2 hours long. There's like a 90-minute version of this film,
80
which
minutes,
would be
yeah.
amazing.
80 to 90
it
minutes.
would be amazing.
Yeah.
It actually would be class. There's so many good elements to this film. But yeah, the pacing regularly just slows right down.
Yeah. So Gwynplaine's show then, we cut to a little bit later. So it's doing a lot better than it was previously. A rabid crowd starts to chant for his arrival, but he's nervous and he starts to get comforted by Dia. So clearly they're a bit of an emotional support system for each other. And then Derry Moore, who's Josiana's betrothed, they doesn't seem much of a romantic relationship between the two of them, but clearly they've been put together and they're kind of lined up that these two are going to marry each other.
Yeah, it's just a status-based thing.
Exactly, yeah. So that's obviously they're betrothed to each other for convenience more so than anything. But he finds Josiana and tells her, you need to get to the Queen's side ASAP because she's pretty pissed that you weren't there earlier. And she's on a mad one that you're not there, basically. And then a scuffle breaks out with other men who are interested in Josiana because she's an attractive woman. And basically they're presenting the lower classes as like these woman obsessed demons. Mm-hmm. Yeah, bit weird. Again, doesn't really need to be in there, but it is in there. So we have to mention it. Then we get back to the palace, and the Queen is unimpressed with Josiana. And Barkilphedro says to Josiana, look, I'm here to help. Derry Moore tells Josiana, I'm unhappy with your conduct at the fair, but she's adamant that she's going back because she wants to see the Laughing Man, because she has clearly been taken with him in some way. So then Gwynplaine and Dia prepare for the show that night, and Ursus is excited because he's heard that there's going to be a Duchess in attendance. Obviously Josiana's presence has gotten around a little bit. Ursus says then, we basically come out at the start of the play, and Ursus says, I wrote the play after Shakespeare's manner, only better. So clearly he's a little bit full of himself, this dude. And then the show begins. Josiana starts to watch intently, and when Gwynplaine comes out and the crowd then starts laughing at him, she looks really angry and she looks really peed off. So I think we're meant to think basically that she's taking it personally that the crowd are laughing at this guy. So maybe she identifies more with him than the average person. That's what I took from this scene anyway.
Yeah, I think she was also definitely just like generally fascinated by him.
Yeah.
I think she just kind of thought he was an interesting character to bump into. He wasn't like anyone else. So yeah, the show happens, and it's actually a really great bit of acting from Conrad Veidt, where we kind of see from his perspective, he's kind of scanning around as he's getting laughed at, and they do an effect which kind of makes it out as if he's kind of like got teary eyes. Basically, it's kind of like a watery effect on the screen, which is very good. And then when he makes eye contact with Josiana, he covers his mouth, which is the thing that he did as a child whenever he gets nervous. So you could tell he was more nervous that there was someone not laughing at him because he wasn't used to it. And he kind of locks eyes with her, and then when he goes back to scanning around, he kind of shows his mouth off again because it's what everybody's pointing at and laughing at. And yeah, I just thought it was a great bit of acting, and he just, his eyes in the scene are so sad and deprived basically of love, really, other than from Dia. And he goes backstage, and the melodrama continues because Dia overhears Ursus talking about how attractive Josiana is. And she's like, oh, well, she couldn't have been that attractive, was she? To Gerwyn Price, to Gwynplaine. And he doesn't answer, which doesn't really fit the rest of the narrative, because for the rest of it, it's portrayed that he
Only has eyes for Dia.
he only has eyes for Dia, and what he's doing with the subplot with Josiana is to kind of validate his feelings for Dia. But then in this scene, for some reason, he doesn't have feelings for Dia, and he's only thinking about Josiana. It's bizarre because then he receives a letter basically from Josiana a little while later, which says, "I'm the one who didn't laugh. Was it because I'm in love with you, or was it because I feel sorry for you? Meet me later to find out." And his whole thing is, oh well, if she could have fallen in love with a face like mine, then I don't feel as guilty being in love with Dia, because he feels guilty that she would be in love with him because she's blind and he thinks he's too grotesque to be with someone, which is a whole other thing.
Yeah, it's kind of flimsy logic,
also,
but maybe you can understand a little bit where he's coming from, maybe.
Yeah, it's a bit like school, or sorry, it's a bit like a childhood. What are them Hans Christian Andersen books called? Like, what are they? Like a, not like a folk tale, but you know what I mean. It's like one of them things. It's like, for like a child, it's like perceivable that something that extreme is possible, but like it doesn't really work for me, I don't think. But we do also get a scene after the show, which is pretty interesting, which is the scene where he's rubbing off his makeup in the mirror. And I think if there's any outward direct comparisons you can make between it and Joker, it's that one shot of him looking at himself in the mirror, rubbing his makeup off. And we obviously have a very similar scene in the Joaquin Phoenix Joker film. But besides that, there's very few real comparisons other than the way he looks.
Yeah, it's more just the look, I think. That's clearly the inspiration. Yeah. So yeah, that night Gwynplaine leaves and he tells his dog, what's the dog's name again? Homo. He tells Homo to stay with Dia.
How could you forget?
Yeah, how could I forget? He tells Homo to stay with Dia, and then he gets into the carriage that Josiana had sent. So Dia is very nervous then when she wakes up because he's not there. And then she tries to follow him, but then she obviously struggles because it's dark at night and he's not there, and Homo probably hasn't quite returned. So she's obviously lost her bearings a little bit because she's obviously she's a blind woman. Then Gwynplaine rides the cart and he arrives at the house, and Josiana's asleep wearing a nightie. There's a great shot of him then kind of almost feeling paralysed when she wakes up, and she's kind of starting to get closer to him. She's trying to maybe seduce him, and he doesn't know whether to kind of go away, or he doesn't know how to react to this whole thing. So it's kind of a good moment then where he's kind of feeling kind of paralysed. He's just kind of stuck in position for a few seconds because he doesn't know how to receive Josiana in the state. And then we cut back to Dia, and she's waiting anxiously. So Gwynplaine is then hiding his scars, like how you said he tends to do. When he meets a new person, he's not sure about how they're going to receive him. He kind of covers his mouth like that. And then a bell chimes, and Josiana receives a letter informing her that Gwynplaine is the rightful heir to the Clancharlie estate, that he's actually Lord Clancharlie's son. And the Queen tells her that she's annulled her marriage to Derry Moore, so that she can marry Gwynplaine to legitimise her claim. So she cries and she starts to cradle a monkey, which is a bit weird. But yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so Gwynplaine then returns back after Homo the dog does this trick that he does later on in the film as well, where he kind of drags Dia out to a certain position by her dress. I just thought, like, what a good boy. The fact that he was able to do that, what a good boy. And yeah, she falls asleep crying over this letter. So whenever he finds her, this is Gwynplaine, he tears up the letter and he throws it away, and he then falls asleep in her lap. And then she feels his face, but not his mouth, because he won't let her do that. He never has at this point. And yeah, basically she says, "God closed my eyes so I could see the real Gwynplaine," which I thought was a pretty cool line.
Yeah, it's a nice line, actually. I agree.
Yeah, but again, like, you can... One of the things with this film is, I'll be honest, other than one specific shot which genuinely I really enjoyed, I found a lot of this to be quite predictable as to where it was going. And yeah, it's from the 20s, so like, as we said with other films before, maybe these tropes didn't exist beforehand, but like, there's a lot of stuff in here that just feels like tropes that are really easy to predict almost, and like that it's not as easy to engage with a film where a scene kind of starts and you know how it's going to end, but you have to sit through the scene, if you get me.
Yeah, it's like you can probably handle a longer film when it's less predictable and you don't really know where it's going. But when you know where it's going, and a lot of scenes contain a lot of filler, and it's probably at least a half an hour more than it should be. I think that's when your patience starts to wear thin. So that was definitely the case for me. For me watching this, yeah, I agree.
So yeah, they have this big moment of happiness then where they've basically accepted each other and they love each other and they're going to be together forever. And psych, because Gwynplaine's getting arrested. Yeah, they've sent the royal guards from the estate down to grab him because they basically want to just keep him so that they can force him to marry Josiana so that she's definitely getting that estate through all the paperwork, I'm sure. And also, so they take him away, but he says, "Don't let Dia know that I've been arrested." Not really sure why. She's a grown ass woman, man.
Yeah,
I'm sure she can. I'm sure she can fucking understand it. Like,
yeah,
it's not like you did anything.
Yeah.
And Ursus is like, okay, I won't let her know. So he's taken away to Chatham prison, which is where we find out that Harkonnen died earlier. So I think that was the purpose of him dying so fast, was so that we're meant to like really fear for him in this prison, because it killed off this character straight away, pretty much, this prison. And yeah, we then get a pretty ridiculous scene where they all try and pretend that the show was going on as normal the next night, so that Dia doesn't think that he's not there. But what makes no sense to me is they're cheering for him, which like nobody has ever done. All they do is laugh at him normally in the crowd. But when these guys are pretending to be the crowd so that Dia thinks he's there, they're all like, yeah, Gwynplaine. It's like no one's ever done that. They just point and laugh at him.
Yeah,
it made no sense.
It doesn't make any sense. We should also mention that Gwynplaine is going to be made appear in the House of Lords after kind of the marriage goes through. So, but for now he's a prisoner, and it's basically a forcible peerage and a forcible marriage. But yeah, like the way they kind of react, the way Ursus reacts doesn't really ring true. The way the crowd reacts when Gwynplaine doesn't show up doesn't really ring true. The way Gwynplaine doesn't want Dia to know that he's been arrested, like the way he reacts then doesn't really ring true.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of like flimsy motivational work here at play, and it means that it's hard to get invested when you don't really know why people are acting the way they're acting. So yeah, we cut back and Barkilphedro and Gwynplaine are in a carriage, and Gwynplaine has now become a peer, or is in the process of becoming a peer, and Barkilphedro tells Gwynplaine that the royal has been disturbed. Will you walk the last few steps? At this point, I wasn't too sure if they got ambushed, if Barkilphedro, the weirdo that he is, had set something up, but it doesn't really look like it. Anyway, meanwhile, Dia follows them with Homo, the guide dog. She follows him somewhere, so he maybe has gotten Gwynplaine's scent, is what I got from this.
Yeah, same.
Then we cut inside the House of Lords, and Gwynplaine is peered by Queen Anne. And Deary Moore meets Dia, who he sees her in the hallway, and he tells her to come with him. They'll give the Queen a surprise. So then, when Gwynplaine then involuntarily laughs at the Queen's decree that he marry Duchess Josiana, the whole crowd starts to laugh, because obviously no one acts like this to the Queen. And then Dia realises then he's inside because she hears the reaction, and she's like, well, I've heard that every single night in my life. So then Barkilphedro, the weirdo, quietly moves Dia away, because he obviously doesn't want them to be reunited. He doesn't want Gwynplaine and Dia to be reunited, and he doesn't want them to cause any disturbance. So he basically manhandles Dia, and he drags her outside to the courtroom steps, or to the House of Lords steps, and then she faints. And she's brought down to Ursus, who's waiting outside. Ursus, by the way, he's been told he's been excommunicated. He's been told that he must leave England.
Yeah.
By that night, and that obviously goes for Dia as well. So he's outside, so they basically only have until that night to escape, otherwise they'll be arrested and they'll probably be killed. So he's on a bit of a time crunch himself there, Ursus.
And yeah, in the House of Lords, eventually the hand drops, or the face covering drops, and he's dressed as a lord, but his mouth comes out, and everybody's saying it's an outrage that there's a clown in the House of Lords, and then they twist it and they're like, oh, look at him, like I said earlier, where this scene happens a few times. They're like, look at him, he's laughing at the Queen, he's laughing at the House of Lords. It's like they just straight there, just because he's a smile on his face. And yeah, they're all giving it a stink that he's in the House of Lords, and he's laughing at the Queen. He's besmirching the Queen by having this expression on his face. God damn expression on his face.
Yeah, and then the Queen then decides that she wants Gwynplaine arrested for defying her orders. But then there's a whole commotion then starts, and Gwynplaine manages to make a bit of an escape as the whole commotion's going on. People are unsure where to go. So then he just says, like, fuck it, I'm going to get the hell out of here. So he tries to escape, and then the people then hear that Gwynplaine's come back, and they flock towards him. And then Gwynplaine manages to learn that Dee and Ursus have been banished. But he might still have time to catch them because their boat doesn't leave until that night.
And from here on, the movie's great.
Yeah, this is easily, at this point now, the best section of the film, the final 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, so when he leaves the House of Lords, he fucking dives headfirst through a window. Yeah. And then he gets back to his people, as he calls them, even though they laughed at him the whole film. He gets back to his people, and they tell him that they've been basically evicted from the country. So then there's a big stunt where they help him scale this giant gate to get over to evade the
oncoming crowd,
the royal guards, pretty much, because they're coming towards him, and his people are basically acting as a human shield so that he can escape. He gets over the wall. Then he's climbing up another wall where he has a big sword fight with a guy. And he cuts him down, and he then does a stunt fall off this giant wall. Then he gets through another window. He gets onto a roof. And then we get a roof jump from one building to another, which was also a really well shot stunt sequence, where he then ends up just about making it onto the ledge. And at this point, this is the only point in the film where I was questioning if I actually knew what was going to happen. I was like, oh fuck, are they actually they're gonna kill him? That'd be wild. But no, he manages to, just in the nick of time, climb up the ledge and get into that window.
Yeah, people pull him into the window to safety, and he manages then to keep running, and he basically drives to the docks to try and catch Dee and Ursus. And then Homo the dog jumps into the water and swims towards Gwynplaine when he catches his scent. Obviously, he shows his teeth.
Great sense of smell.
Yeah, exactly.
Great sense of smell, this dog.
Good dog, Homo. So he shows his teeth to the villains, and it's implied that he chews a bunch of them to death. At least one.
Yeah, he drowns one. He like fucking headlocks him and puts him in a sleeper hold and just pulls him into the water. This dog, it's great.
Good dog, Homo. So yeah, that then gives Gwynplaine the opportunity to obviously escape, and he jumps up into the boat, and he gets on a ship with Dee, and they obviously embrace. And yeah, that's The Man Who Laughs. That's the end of the film. Right there.
Yeah, happily ever after.
Yeah, pretty much.
They escape.
Yeah.
So The Man Who Laughs is the film that inspired the Joker. No, it's a 1928 silent film from Germany. It is... Yeah, it's on a lot of lists of like films you should watch before you die. But Shane, my question is this film as essential as people make it out to be?
Not in my opinion, no. Like, I do think it's at least a half an hour longer than it should be. There's just so many scenes that, like we said, go on longer than they need to. It doesn't really, like, I can see visually how it would inspire the Joker, but once you get past that, it's got nothing whatsoever to do with the Joker. Like, I think people are trying to make some connections between the Joker's actions and Gwynplaine's, and I don't really see it. Gwynplaine's a much more sympathetic figure, for one thing. Like, Joker's all about chaos, he's all about disorder, he's all about, obviously, his own ends, whereas Gwynplaine is a much more sympathetic figure. I don't see how the two characters are alike from a motivational point of view, from a psychological, internal point of view. It's really only their facial disfigurements that they have any real connection. So once you kind of get past that, I don't think it's something that you would need to necessarily watch if you're a big fan of Joker. If you're a silent film, like, it's not the greatest silent film I've ever seen, by any stretch of the imagination either. So from that point of view, yeah, I don't think you need to go out of your way to see The Man Who Laughs. Let's put it that way. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's good. I gave it 3 stars. I think there's a lot of good in the film. I just think there's a lot of fat in the film as well. It could be easily trimmed. Scenes are too long. Some scenes are unnecessary. It's not paced particularly amazingly. And it's strange as well in comparison to other films that came out around then. that are much better paced. Even the Universal monster movies that came out a few years later, the Dracula, Frankenstein, they're much shorter and much better paced. And yeah, I don't know. It's 1928, so it's like it's towards the end of the silent. Well,
Yeah,
it is the
pretty
end of the
much the end of
silent
the
era,
silent era.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that Jal, what's his name? Oh, the jazz singer. That had already come out by this point. That's a shite movie, by the way. The first ever talkie, it sucks. It's boring ass film. And yeah, so you would have thought by this point that they would have, if you're still making a silent film, that it would have been maybe paced a bit better. But yeah, no, I like The Man Who Laughs. I can't see me wanting to come back to it. It's one of them ones with silent films. It's like, I feel like the best way to consume them, and nobody ever consumes them like this, but the best way to consume a silent film is how they were originally done, which is you see them in a cinema with like an orchestra, like at the big premieres. I feel like that is the best way to consume a silent film. Watching it on YouTube or whatever, and someone's just basically throwing a playlist of classic music together in the background. It's not the same. You don't get the same effect. So maybe that is why people these days are maybe harsher on silent films, because we're not really getting the right effect, if you get me.
The correct experience. On that topic, obviously, we
Yeah.
might as well start talking on that particular note about what I've been watching lately. So one of the films I've seen lately is The Lodger, which is an early Hitchcock film, a silent film from 1920s, probably 27 as well, maybe. But to your point there,
around then.
27. So to your point there, again, it's a decent film. I liked it more than, I gave it 3 stars, and I liked it more than probably the rating would suggest. But the reason I was fairly low on the rating is I watched it on YouTube, and the fucking music that came with that film it completely ruins the experience for you. It's so bad.
Yeah.
The musical accompaniment is, there's one scene in particular where it's they're trying to put modern music and match it up with what's going on
Yeah,
screen.
that happened to me once with a silent film as well.
it's like-
Yeah, fortunately, I've seen The Lodger with good music in the background, so I don't have to worry about that. But for me, I had the same experience with Man with a Moving Camera, or Man with a Movie Camera, sorry. Man with a Movie Camera, which is like this whole social experiment with no dialogue and no characters, and it's an hour and a half long, and it's silent. And the version I watched it with had like early 2000s techno. I was like, I actually just muted the TV and I watched it totally silent. I was like, this is shite. And it almost killed my experience of the film. But then I watched it like literally just on mute, and it was more enjoyable. Yeah, sometimes people upload these things to YouTube and they're just dickheads. They just put shit music in the background. Like, we're not getting the full experience. And maybe that is the case with The Man Who Laughs. Maybe if we saw it in say the Stella with a fucking orchestra, we'd love this film. But yeah, the version we saw is the version we saw, and we can only comment on it. I gave it, as I said, 3 stars. I thought it was good. I thought that, Conrad Veidt is absolutely fantastic in this film. There's no question about that, and it is comfortably the best part of the film, his performance. He's so great in this film. And yeah, that was the Man Who Laughs. What did you give it in the end?
I gave it 2.5. Not too far away,
Yeah. So what have I watched recently? So as I said last week, again, I keep harping on about it. I'm doing my spooky season thing. So I watched the Final Destination films. They're a great time. They're stupid fun, basically. And up until the 5th one, I could be in the minority of thinking this, but I feel up until the 5th one, they do just get progressively slightly worse until you get to 4, which is like borderline. Like, how you can make a Final Destination film that's like almost unwatchable is insane, because the concept is so fun. But then 5 is class. It brings it right back up again. Thoroughly enjoyed 5.
Well, I'd never seen the original Beetlejuice, and I wanted to go and see the new Beetlejuice in the cinema, so I watched that on Netflix. Decent film. I gave it 3 stars. Then I saw the sequel the night later, and I actually enjoyed the sequel more. Maybe I just knew more what to expect, maybe, but I did enjoy the sequel a little bit more, so I gave it 3.5 there. And then I saw Speak No Evil. Haven't really had a chance to see too much stuff at home, so a couple of cinema trips. Anyway, Speak No Evil, which is the James McAvoy, obviously starring remake of a Danish film from a couple of years ago, and that's a good that has a lot of again social commentary in there about kind of the way we interact with each other, kind of communication, and kind of yeah, kind of insidious, the insidious nature of people who can take advantage of others, and kind of cult of personality as well, because they're drawn into this guy's personality that they're willing to overlook some pretty obvious red flags. So it's a little bit formulaic towards the end, I'd say. But it's overall it's worth the watch, I'd say, if you're interested in a trip to the cinema. So yeah, I haven't, like I said, seen too much stuff lately because I've just been pretty busy. So they're the main ones as to what I've seen. What about yourself?
Yeah, so I just had a quick look there. So yeah, I watched The Belko Experiment. That's a good film. It's basically taking the battle royale concept and putting it in an office building, which is pretty cool. I watched Oni Baba, which has been on my bucket list for ages. I finally watched it. Not what I was expecting. I really loved it. I was expecting to love it, but I was expecting like a supernatural, people are getting haunted by this demon film, when in actuality it is far more grounded and far more of like a drama, a melodrama, if anything. And then just the last act is just pure fucking horror. It's kind of like an A24 film where you start off for the first two acts, you're like, oh yeah, no, this is just a really deep drama. I was like, actually no, it is a fucking horror, never mind. And the last act just kind of sweeps you. And yeah, Oni Baba's great. Really enjoyed it. And I watched Ready or Not for the first time, which is fucking class.
Ready or
Love
Not
that
is
film.
so good. A perfect blend of
brilliant film.
comedy, gore, and like some genuine like scares, some genuinely like scary moments.
Yeah, Samara Weaving is so great. She's fucking class. I actually also watched The Babysitter, and she's the only good part of that film. As I said in my review, Mick G, or whatever his fucking name is, couldn't even direct Traffic. He's a useless director. Useless. Yeah. But yeah, no, she is the only good thing in that Babysitter film. And if I do watch the sequel, which I might because it's on Netflix, I will only be watching it for Samara Weaving. There was nothing else. Actually, the young lad in that film's solid as well. I don't remember his name, but he was solid as well. But yeah, no, the McGee directing is, yeah, it ain't it. It just reminds me of them. Like, do you remember the Jedward popping candies? Yeah. It's like a film version of that. And yeah, so that's The Man Who Laughs, and that's Film Club, which was a very short but sweet arc. Sweet for us because we raked in the views. Yeah. Now, for the next month, it's Universal Monster Month. Yes, I am excited. I have already seen these films, some of them a few times. I thoroughly enjoy them. Yeah, next week is Dracula. Bela Lugosi. Fucking love that guy. I've seen so many of his films, and he just plays the same character every time. It's great. He is a fabulous, fabulous, fabulous actor. Is Bela Lugosi. And yeah, I'm buzzing to cover Dracula, and then from there, obviously Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, and then Bride of Frankenstein. We're just doing them four for now. Who knows? We might touch on the other ones in the future, but for now we're gonna do those four, the four sort of first big ones. And if you're saying, but what about the Mummy? The Mummy's shite. That's the main reason we're not covering it. It's not very good, and Bride of Frankenstein is infinitely better.
Also, we have an arc in November that we want to get to as well, which will reveal closer to the time. But we basically don't have the time to cover more than 4 films. So
pretty
Harry's
much,
Harry's more up to speed on the Universal monster movies. The Invisible Man's the only one I've seen of those 4. So he's made the executive decision, which I'm willing to go along with. Yeah,
no, I think they're great. And as well, like we ain't even touching on them, but like The Wolfman and Creature from the Black Lagoon are also both great. They're both great.
We can maybe do Wolfman next year because there's a Christopher Abbott starring film, live action film, coming out. I think it's around January to February, maybe March, in around then, early in the year anyway. We're starring Christopher Abbott, who's a good actor. So obviously they're remaking that. So yeah, maybe we can get to Wolfman at that point. But yeah, not until
then. I'd love to. Wolfman is so great. It's Lon Chaney Jr., the son of the guy who was meant to play the dude in this.
Yes.
What's his name? Gerwin Price.
Gwynplaine.
Yes. Yeah, so Universal Monster Month. Buzzing. Can't wait. So yeah, next Friday, it's Dracula. between now and then, there may be a solo video. Who knows? Maybe there was one before this as well. Maybe there was 2 before this. Who knows? Because, this is all hypotheticals, but if you can't tell, there's a Joker comic there. I've read it a couple of times. I'm tempted to do a video on comparing the two, The Man Who Laughs, and if I do, it'll probably come out before this episode to get us hyped for it. And then, yeah, hopefully your 12 Angry Men video comes out as well. And then, who knows? Who knows what else is coming out? And then we'll be in October, and then the year's almost over. It's all going by so fast.
Pretty crazy, yeah.
And yeah, that was the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Thank you so much for watching.
Yeah, thanks again, guys. The reception over the last few weeks, the last couple of months has been absolutely brilliant. So keep it up, hopefully.
Yeah, keep commenting. Just comment what you think of the videos, what you think of the movies, what you want us to see. What you want to see on the podcast, what movies you like, what you don't like.
I love hearing how much of an idiot I am. Keep it coming.
Yeah. Tell us all the things that we get wrong. Unfortunately, I only seem to get slated on Reddit. I never get slated in the YouTube comments. On Reddit, people think I'm a fool, but on YouTube, I seem to be safe. And that was The Man Who Laughs, episode 23, which is insane. And yeah, thank you very much. I've been Harry Bailey.
I've been Shane Maloney.
And we'll see you next week for Universal Monster Month. It's Dracula.
Dracula.
It's going to be great.
Thanks, guys.